hate it.
All right, all right. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome back once again to The Scoop Rugby Pod. I'm not by myself. I'm joined by the regulars, Jade, all the way from South Africa, and Enda is here all the way from Ireland. Waiting for a few guys to join online while we are going to start and kick off this program. Enda, how's it going? How was your trip in France last week?
Great, mate. It's good to be back. Sorry I couldn't join last week, but I was taken in Paris for the first time. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. We'll get onto it later when we kind of discuss the match, but it was the best game I've been at. Brilliant atmosphere. Met a lot of Boks, a lot of Springboks fans. We had great crack. There was so much camaraderie between both sets of fans. Brilliant time. I had a long old trip. I only got the ticket about a week before the game, but managed to get a flight via Stockholm, which was it was quite the journey, but completely and utterly worth it. And for me, the game of the tournament, right?
Yeah, 100%. Jade, how's it going? Are you good?
All good, and so you enjoyed yourself that side. Glad you enjoyed yourself, but it wasn't the game of the tournament, man. You had to listen to Steve Anson. New Zealand, Italy was the game of the tournament, guys. Yeah, we'll get into that, but I'm all good. I'm all good.
Yeah. Let's actually get into that while we can. I mean, as our first topic of discussion today. Obviously, we heard what Ian Foster had to say yesterday regarding a spectacle. He spoke about 29 minutes of ball and play time between Ireland and South Africa, and then obviously 32 minutes ball and play time between New Zealand and Italy. I mean, Enda, you said it was a big spectacle last week's game, and I think every other rugby fan or rugby follower out there would also appreciate the element or the intensity of that game, the physicality, the brutality, and also, I mean, it had us on the edge of our seats for a full 80 minutes. Can you tell us maybe more about the atmosphere as well, and also then just trying to break down a bit of the game as well?
Yeah, look, for me, like I found these comments by Foster's completely baffling and just utterly nonsense. Like especially when you talk about, like, there were 27 minutes ball and play time in the Ireland B South Africa game. There were 2 additional minutes in the All Blacks v Italy game. Like, there's so much more to rugby than just attacking rugby. Like, people want to see big defense. But just going back to the game, like I was at the game with a man in his 60s who's been at he's been at numerous World Cups. He's followed Ireland around the world. He's a big rugby fan. He's been to many games. He said it was by far the best game, the best atmosphere he's ever experienced. And that would be the same for me. I haven't been to quite as many games. It was my first World Cup game, but it was by far just the best sporting spectacle I've ever been at. And like, we were at the stadium 3 hours beforehand, and that's when the atmosphere started to build. That's when the singing started. That's when there was the great camaraderie between fans. And to be fair to the hosts as well, they did a really good job at putting on, showing different clips and getting the crowd kind of involved. And for me, that's how you do it. Like, that's how you put on a spectacle. And then the best thing about the game as well was, like, obviously the atmosphere is absolutely incredible. It was a 9 p.m. kickoff lately at local time as well, which is quite, I didn't get home, I think, until about 2 a.m. But yeah, it was like that, like, what a kickoff time as well. So there was so much time. And we've all kind of heard about stories about games, maybe been on late in the evening or early in the day, and people kind of stay in the pub right up until the last minute, and they're kind of late filtering into the stadium. Like, it was the complete opposite with this game. And I think the reason for that was because there was so much hype about this match, and guess what? It lived up to it. And you could tell, like, from like when the teams, even when the warm, you should have seen like the reception, even when Sexton came out. I know I never shut up about Sexton, but when he came out and was doing his warm up, he got a massive cheer from the Irish supporters, maybe a few SA supporters, I don't know, and he acknowledged that as well. And that was the intensity from there. And then once the both sets of teams came out, the roar was something like I've never heard before. The singing, and then just I've never been at a game as well. Like I could talk about this game for hours, honestly, but I don't want to bore you all to death. But like every decision that went Ireland's way or went the Box way, it was like either team had scored a try. Like if the other team knocked on the ball, like turnovers, I think were celebrated more so than tries, especially from Ireland, because everybody thought like the big talking point before this game was Ireland's attack versus South Africa's defence, and by God did Ireland's defence show up, and we did a really good job at slowing down South Africa's ball and winning some really smart turnovers. But that's what the atmosphere was like. Every little win was celebrated like it was a score, and that's what you want. And it was a tight game. And this is what brings like this is probably one of the reasons why the Six Nations, like every year on year, it has massive viewership numbers. It, like every single game almost sells out, and they're not high scoring games. A lot of them are bloody tight, and that's what people want. They want tight games, don't they?
100%. I mean, I agree fully. It's been one of the most entertaining game for me personally. I mean, even the purest of purest rugby fans would also appreciate last week's game. And then Jade, looking at the All Blacks, obviously putting 90 points, nobody expected them to be that clinical, to be honest. But obviously, the words, I mean, the spotlight now in this game is more about what Ian Foster said rather than what the All Blacks put out on display. Your thoughts, obviously, you can start off obviously by the Italy versus New Zealand game, and then let's discuss or debate this element of what do we want to see in a Rugby World Cup, or what do we want to see in rugby generally? Is it the spectacle of 90 points versus 6, or is it the spectacle of 13-8, very intense Ireland and Springbok game?
Guys, when you look at that Ireland Springbok game, and there's no comparison to the game between New Zealand and Italy. I mean, anybody would pay tickets to rather watch the South African Ireland game than the New Zealand Italy game, which was a blowout in the end, regardless of play in ball in time and regardless of what. The issue comes on with Sansa. Sansa, or maybe more Anzac, has been promoting, play in time for the past, playing field for the past few years. They've actually been the part of Super Rugby, trying to get more ball in play. If you watch most podcasts or listen to most podcasts from New Zealand and Australia, they emphasize a lot on ball in play, ball in play. I think for them, there's a stigma, regarding union and versus league, because I think the competition is high that side, and it's a big stigma as to league, union being boring, start boring. We've heard this comments a few times during the British Irish Alliance tour. We've heard, JK and even Foster saying it was boring. They fell asleep during the tournament. So there's a lot of jazz being thrown at that, but I think that is the background where it comes from. It's more their target market, what they're looking to sell the game, and how they're looking to advertise the game. But guys, we're at the World Cup. We are not in a franchise tournament now. We're at the World Cup, and we want to see two colossal teams going head to head against each other and bringing the best out of them defensively, tactically, on attack. And for Foster to say that, although he didn't say it in many words, but you need to understand and read between the lines what he was hinting at. Yeah, I get what he was saying. I know where he's coming from, but I don't agree with him. At the World Cup, I want to see what I saw for Africa versus Ireland. I mean, if we get two quarterfinals, if we get a quarterfinal between New Zealand and Ireland, similar test match, and the same as most probably France and South Africa, similar test match, similar intensity, boy, it's going to be a spectacle. You're going to sell the game. You're going to get more viewers. I mean, after that Ireland South African game, I had guys that, what we call them as World Cup viewers in South Africa, only watch rugby every 4 years when there's a World Cup. And those guys were telling me, wow, what a game, what a game they saw. And yeah, I preferably, although I'm a big All Black supporter, I prefer to watch, South Africa Ireland game the way it was and the way they tested themselves. And one mistake in the game was basically costed the Ireland, or could have cost Africa the game. To go on the All Blacks performance on Friday night, to touch very briefly at it, I think they were clinical, they were sharp. I still think they have a lot of work to do on defense. I don't think, between Rico and Talia, something is not right there, because they tend to be out of position. a few times when the other teams on attack. But also other concern or the All Blacks, we're looking at them maybe facing Ireland. They're losing still a few more, how could I say, on defense, they're still losing a lot of contact, or they're losing a lot of, looking for the word, but in a collision, they're not getting the advantage on defense. Italy scored 17 points against them, and there was stats that New Zealand only made 17 line breaks. During that game, scored 14 tries where they were clinical. However, Italy got over the advantage line a few times that they shouldn't have. If you're looking at the spectacle of the game. So New Zealand has a lot of work to do defensively if they want to win this World Cup. Attack, they look okay. They look solid. They were stuck to their guns. They were sharp. They were clinical. They were good. But yeah, going on faster, guys, it's a World Cup. We want to see the best teams playing against each other. We want to see a massive contest. So, although I'm a New Zealand supporter, I'm team rest of the world on this one.
Team rest of the world. It's the rest of the world against New Zealand, it seems. There's been plenty of news that we've been covered in the past week since Antoine Dupont got injured, and they seem to be planning to rush him back as soon as possible. I just want us to touch on a little bit on our opinions regarding him being rushed back, and obviously him being able to assert himself in, I don't know, be his former self with a metal plate on his face. How ready do we think he would be by quarterfinal time or semi-final time? There's been a few people that have shared some guys previously who were also injured in a similar fashion, who got back within 3 to 4 weeks and were able to play. I mean, do you guys think, we'll start with you, Enda, do you think it's wise for Galthie to rush Dupont back into the French setup by quarterfinal and semi-final time? Do you think he'll be ready in time? And also, what impact does it have on France, on the French team, if Dupont doesn't make it back on time?
Well, I guess only time will tell. It's the obvious answer, but he's that good. Like, we all know he's the best scrum half in the world, or maybe potentially the second best, depending on your view on Aaron Smith. So for France, and he is that leader. Like, they did lose Ntamack before the World Cup, so we all know his importance. He's so cool, he's so calm, he's collected, he's such a brilliant player. We could go on about him for ages. We all know how good he is. So I think it's a risk worth taking, certainly from a French perspective. Like, you want your best player, if not the best player in the world, on the pitch playing in those important knockout games. So I think it's a risk worth taking. I think it will pay off for them. I know there has been a bit of talk about this and a lot of people raising question marks. But I mean, if a medic has signed off on this, who's fully qualified, I'm okay with that. For me, the bigger concern was his brain injury. So as long as he's passed those HIF tests, that's what I'm more comfortable with. As long as his brain is in good health. And that for me was the bigger concern. Then I know I'm not trying to trivialize his injury, his facial injury in any sense at all, but based on what we've heard in their most recent history in terms of former rugby players, the most important piece for this was his brain health. So if his brain is fully recovered and he's past fit to play, then I'm okay with it. And I think it's a risk worth taking. And I think if France are to go on and win this thing, they need him back. Even with a metal plate and God knows a metal plate rather in his face and God knows what else. We've seen Brad Barrett, and I know you've touched on other players who've done it.
Yeah.
But this is at the highest level. There's obviously a risk involved. How will it affect his play? That'll be interesting to watch as well. Like, will he be very conscious of it? I'm sure he will, especially if he's wearing something. Will he be that bit more nervous? We all know he's as tough as nails. If you think back to that really famous tackle that he made in last year's Six Nations, where Hansen almost had a run in, and for I don't know how he did it, but Dupont managed to hold him up and drive him into touch. It was an incredible piece of defense. Yeah. And we know how strong, like, he's a small guy in stature, but we all know that he's got strength. Yeah. But it'd be interesting to see how the injury plays on his mental preparation for the game as well. But only time will tell. But I think if France are to win this, I think they certainly need to pop back metal plate in his face or not.
Fair enough. Jade, adversity is a big part of any team's process, and obviously learnings and falling down and getting back up again. I mean, we've seen with most teams that have won the Rugby World Cup, the Springboks had faced plenty of adversity during the 2016-2017 era under Alistair Coetzee. New Zealand faced some adversity in 2007, 2008, and some parts of 9, and getting up and winning in 2011. With the French team, do you think that they have faced some adversity leading up to this World Cup? I mean, we know Ireland has faced plenty of adversity as well in their quest to win the Rugby World Cup, and this could be one of their biggest chances of actually winning the whole thing this year. But with the French team, I mean, have we seen them being challenged? Have we seen them facing adversity? I mean, New Zealand lost the likes of Carter, the likes of Cruden, the likes of, is it Colin Slade, I think? I mean, all in one tournament.
Slade.
Yeah, all in one tournament and still managed to pull it off. I mean, looking at France, what are your thoughts regarding this adversity and having been challenged going forward or actually competing in this competition?
Yeah, so Scoop, if you're looking at France and if you look at the way they set up, like I said a few times before, they've set this whole World Cup up around Anton Dupont. He's been the poster boy. It's similar, if you want to look at something similar to maybe Ronaldo in 1998 in the World Cup, basically for FIFA World Cup, something like that, And even if you're looking at the neutral owner and asking the average rugby player or rugby supporter, who is the French second scrummy? Who is the backup scrummy? They might not be able to answer you because everybody just knows Anton Dupont. Now, for me, Galthie needs to weigh it up. He needs to see, okay, what effect does this have on Anton Dupont's natural game? We know he likes to be physical. We know he likes to get stuck in. We know he likes to have his hands on the ball, so he's always involved in play. He likes to, take a few steps back and, set up play. So he likes to be involved in the play. And for me, what effect does this injury have on that game plan or on that gameplay of his? Does it affect his game so that, for example, as Laku, if he comes in, is better suited to that role, or do you go in with a 60 or 70% Anton Dupont? Is he better than your backup 9 or your third choice 9? So that's a decision they have to make. They know you can't go and say Anton is our leader. He's the guy that's leading us forward, because Aldrit is a very good leader. Fico is a very good leader. They have a few other leaders in that team. They can carry it forward. And I mean, Anton will still be a part of the dressing room. So he needs to weigh up that. But in terms of adversity, I don't know what adversity this French team has been through. France is normally a team that thrives through adversity, that just comes together after something happens. Maybe an injury like this would really spark the team. They have a certain way of dealing with things in the past, but not so much under Galthie. This is a young French team who has had, the majority of the squad has had things go their way, from a junior level. If you're looking at the back-to-back and the 20 championships they won together. So things have just fallen in plan, and a lot of them has either been a part of La Rochelle or Toulouse, so they've been a part of setups where, it's gone according to plan, and there hasn't really been a spanner, thrown in their works. I'm pretty much sure they can handle playing without Dupont. They can handle the adversity. If you just go back to 2011 and you look at what happened in New Zealand's camp, I mean, they had Carter, Slade, Cruden, all got injured during that World Cup. And they also had Richie McCaw basically playing at 70%, 60-70%, because he had a broken metatarsal in his foot. So, something similar to that. However, for France, like I say, they need to weigh up their pros and cons. They need to see what effect it does have on Dupont's game. I'm not sure. They say that he would have a contact session this week. If he is cleared from HIA, maybe if he is cleared to play, maybe they'll see against Italy how he goes. If he's cleared, I'm not sure if he's able to play. But I mean, to throw him in the deep end against a physical bot team, they're going to target him. They are going to target him. They're going to look at him. They're going to target him for every collision. They're going to try and get in his face, not literally, but I mean, they're going to target him. So for me, it is a little bit of risk. That is why Galthie needs to take that. He needs to have their pro and cons.
Yeah, it's a difficult position for Galthie to be in, but he seems to be quite confident that it'll be business as usual. But obviously, only time will tell as Enda said as well, and obviously what you said, Jade, is very important for the French team to also going forward. Not obviously leaving you, Jade, as well. I mean, let's have a continuation regarding the not so big teams, or not with teams of the smaller sides of this World Cup. I mean, Fiji managed to go past Georgia yesterday, last night. Very difficult conditions. They were tested to some degree. I mean, do you think there was a lapse, or maybe not taking Georgia very seriously? Or Georgia actually stood up and said, hey, Fiji beat Australia, but we don't want to lose to Fiji. I mean, what are your thoughts regarding Fiji last night against Georgia?
It's basically typical Fiji. What we expect from Fiji. We become accustomed to Fiji, one big scalp, and then the next week, throwing it away. We saw it in the last World Cup where they lost against Uruguay. They never stuck to what they've done good in this tournament. They tried to make the game too loose. They tried to throw the ball around. We saw they tight head prop, taking quick taps. That was stuff they never did against Wales and Australia. They were really structured against, those two teams, and that's why they got positive results, although they didn't win against Wales, but, they ran in close and they beat Australia. Yesterday they were, I would say, although I got a very soft spot for Fiji. They were lucky yesterday. I think that forward pass try is marginal. Also that there was a few goals that Georgia could feel undone by, but from Fiji's perspective, they need to balance as to see, like we just spoke about earlier, ball in play or doing the physical half-graph and, playing test match rugby. At this World Cup so far, they got the balance right between ball in play and test match rugby. So there's times when you're going to have to just win the game first before you're going to throw it around. They can't just go in and play that flying Fijian flair game, because you're not going to get past the quarterfinal by just doing that. You got to do the hard work first. So yeah, but hats off to Georgia. I think in this tournament, they're one of the teams that underperformed according to the standard. We expected more from Georgia. We expected them to, especially up front, we expected them to run Australia in a little bit more close. I mean, if you look at what the Welsh pack and the Fijian pack did to Australia's pack, Georgia didn't really, have a chance there. They drew against Portugal. They came into it yesterday, so hats off to them. They knew they were underperforming, and they put in a relatively big shift yesterday where everybody wrote them off.
Yeah, and Enda, your thoughts of the Fiji and Georgia matchup?
Yeah, I certainly want to touch on just Georgia's performance. Like, it was probably that first half was probably their best performance of the World Cup, and it's what we've been waiting to see. Like, we knew going into the tournament that they were good on defense, so it was good to see them put in a good performance and put it up to Fiji. But from a Fiji perspective, it was definitely disappointing. Like, every neutral wants Fiji to do well. We all love them. We all love how they play, but it was really disappointing to see that lack of control that we've seen in previous games, that kind of mature game that we've seen in previous games. And for me, if they play like that against England in the quarterfinals, England will certainly beat them, because England will just absolutely beat them up and stick to their game plan. We can touch on that England game plan again, but I think they would have too much for them. But hopefully they'll have learned from it. Hopefully it was just a bit of complacency. Maybe they didn't take Georgia seriously enough, and maybe it'll come out someday. But yeah, disappointing from Fiji. Good to see Georgia put in performance. And I do just want to touch on one thing, speaking about Georgia, because there have been a lot of calls, especially after the All Blacks v Italy game. There have been some very loud people on Twitter and other social spaces talking about questioning Italy's, spot in the Six Nations, and whether they should be thrown out, whether there should be promotion relegation, and that Georgia should be given a chance. But for me, I think that I just want to make comment on that. I think that's absolute complete nonsense. It's never going to happen, because for it to happen, every single union in the Six Nations would have to vote to introduce promotion relegation. Guess what? Ireland, for example, would never, ever, ever sign up to this, because Ireland as we know, about 85% of the funding comes from international games. Imagine if Ireland had a bad year and they got relegated from the Six Nations, the union would go bankrupt. It's never going to happen. It's a boring narrative. Let's talk about the positives in Italian rugby. Let's talk about Benetton. Let's talk about their superstars, like Garbizzi and Capuzzo, and what they need to improve on, instead of just constantly come up with this lazy argument of introducing promotion relegation and talking about teams like Georgia coming in But yeah, went off a bit of a tangent there. But yeah, disappointing for Fiji. And good to see Georgia put in a good performance. But yeah, Fiji would need to be a lot better against England if it is indeed them England they play in the quarters.
No, fair enough, 100%. Sticking with you, Enda, looking at obviously Italy against New Zealand and obviously all the noise that has come through post-match. But do you think Italy are maybe saving their players for next weekend? Because for them, next weekend now becomes a do or die game to kind of make an impact in this World Cup or to maybe silence all their critics regarding obviously where they stand within the Six Nations element and obviously how much they have improved since joining the Six Nations in the past, 15, 20 years now. They've been part of it. So, I mean, do you think maybe they are saving themselves for the big one against France, considering the fact that now France don't have Ntamag, they don't have Dupont for the final game of the group?
It's an interesting question. I think Italy were up for this game. I think for the game against the All Blacks, that is, I think they were. Yeah, it's hard to. I don't know if they would target France at home, in the biggest game in the World Cup. I don't think so. I don't think they would target that game. I'd say they were fired up for this All Blacks game, and just everything that could go wrong for them went wrong. It was interesting listening to Crowley's comments after the game, basically saying that he's not even sure if they're going to review it. They might just park it, leave it there, move on, because what is there much to actually review? Like, is it worth doing that? I don't know. It's really interesting comments. You could tell he was just fuming. As a head coach would be after a performance like that, because I think that's another important piece on that game. Like, yes, the All Blacks were good. For me, they were due that kind of game. They had it in them, but also Italy were just so poor. But I think, it'll probably have a positive impact on their game against France. I think they'll be a lot better. They'll be a lot more fired up. It's a do or die for them. But it does unfortunately come back to this tournament and how that these groups are set up. I think it was really disappointing to see Italy in that group. We probably call a lot of groups group of death, but it really was for them to be facing France and the All Blacks. It was almost impossible from the outset. But I don't want to be overly negative about Italy. There are a lot of things going well in that country from a rugby perspective. Look at their 1-20s this year. Look at Benetton. Look at the superstars as we discussed earlier. But yeah, we'll see. And we do know that they do have a good performance in them. They did beat Wales in Wales last year this year in the Six Nations. They are capable of putting in those big performances and getting those scalps. And it is only a matter of time before they win one of these big games. So potentially you're right. Maybe they are targeting this game, and we all know, I think, that they have a good performance in them. But I just think from a neutral perspective, let's just see. Let's just hope we see that next week, because I don't know about you guys and about our listeners how you felt about the games this weekend. And again, we might bring up the proposed 2014 World Cup. I was really disappointed in this weekend's games overall. Especially, I feel like interest levels weren't there. It's really disappointing to see one-sided games.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, I was going to also just touch on that as well in terms of, okay, now we can move the question to Jade. In terms of the overall, I mean, we're in week 4 now. We've had some ups and downs. There's been some controversies with decision-making, the laws of the game, not many people understanding the consistency element, and obviously some teams getting more breaks than others, some teams playing 4 games in 19, 20 days or 16 days or whatever. What's your thought? I mean, your overall look now after 4 weeks of rugby. What are your thoughts regarding this World Cup?
Guys, I'm waiting for the surprise. I'm waiting for the surprise to shake up the World Cup. We normally get that surprise. I mean, we've seen it. Was it Ireland that beat Australia in 2011, and then Japan beating South Africa, Japan beating Ireland and Scotland in 2019, Fiji beating Wales in a few World Cups. I'm waiting for that surprise, because realistically, there hasn't really been a surprise, bar maybe Australia, Fiji. But I mean, if you look at the state of the game in Australia and you look at everything going on in Australia, it's just not really a surprise. So I don't know where that surprise would be. Could it be next week? Scotland? I don't know where the surprise will come, because I don't see it incoming in any of the games tonight.
So maybe we need, a surprise to shake up the tournament a little bit. As far as the minor teams, besides Fiji, I think teams like Samoa and Tonga has been, below average. Tonga do not look fit at all. They look very unfit. Samoa just shows the wrong team. For me, they went away from what the foundation. There was foundation set with Moana Pacifica guys. People say, yeah, they end last in the Super Rugby competition, but remember they play in the New Zealand side section, so they play in the New Zealand franchise. They play New Zealand franchise every week, and they have been positive from Moana Pacifica, but the game that they employed was I don't know. Every Samoan player wants to pick up and drive and run into the opposition. Maybe it's because most of these players play that role in the European clubs, because we know that, Jordan Taufua, Leo Tua, they are the carriers in that club. So, having, how can I say, 10 of those players in a 15-man team it doesn't really add up. They needed more players with flair. But yeah, they've been a real disappointment. I also don't think Mapusu was the ideal coach to coach that team, because on paper, and after what they did to Ireland in the warm-up game, I really thought, wow, they stand a chance, but they went backwards. They really look poor. As far as spectacle is concerned, I mean, we love rugby. Everybody's talking about the World Cup. Everybody's vibing and buzzed about it, but we're still waiting for that, that big scalp, that surprise game. Where's it going to come? Maybe Japan beats Argentina, who's also been poor. I think what's been put off, if you take Italy and Scotland and you put them in Pool D, most likely they'll get out of that pool. Unfortunately for them, it's the luck of the draw. And also to dwell on what Inda said about Italy, I think it's just one of those games you just take up and you just rip it apart and you never ever go back to that game again, I think it was just a once-off. They were just poor on the day, but it doesn't mean that Italian rugby hasn't moved forward. They have moved forward. There's a few guys in there they can, maybe next World Cup they can target making a top 8. But yeah, as far as this World Cup, we need that. We need that surprise. I don't know where's it going to come from, but we need it.
Yeah,
it might come today.
Yeah, 100%. Shake and bake. What are your thoughts, Enda? What are your thoughts after 4 weeks, basically, of Rugby World Cup?
Yeah, I've been really impressed, and having been over in France, taking in that atmosphere, they've put on a great spectacle. It makes me proud to be a massive rugby fan when the tournament's on, and when it's what everybody's talking about it, because we all love rugby and it's such an enjoyable sport to watch. But for me, kind of what and this happens every World Cup, to be honest. There are weekends where I just lose a bit of interest. And it is unfortunately those weekends when it's a tier 1 side playing against a tier 2 side and they just get absolutely hockeyed. Like when the tier 2 side gets hockeyed, it's not enjoyable at all. And I just think that these calls for an increase of this competition to 24 teams is just absolutely it's outrageous. It would be completely pointless. I don't think it's a good look for the game that we're seeing these massive scores. I really don't. And people want to see a spectacle. They want to be, as you touched on earlier, Scoop, they want to be on the edge of their seat watching a game. It might be low scoring, but I know plenty of people who watched that SA v Ireland game and who don't follow rugby, but they thoroughly enjoyed it because it was exciting. There were a couple of minutes to go and it could have gone either way. And that's what people want. And that's not what we're going to get with a 24 team World Cup. It's at the moment we're not, there are loads of games even in the 20 team format where we're not getting close games. So, and I've even seen a rather controversial figure on Twitter suggest would this tournament be better with 16 teams? And look, I know it's a bit outrageous, and I don't think I'd be in favor for it, but it's a really interesting talking point. Would this tournament be better if there were less teams and the games were more competitive? That's a decent argument. I can see where they're coming from. Maybe there'd be more interest. But obviously we do want to expand the game, and I don't think it'll happen, but we do want to grow the tier 2 nations competitiveness. But I think what we need to do then is just focus on the 20 team tournament, accept it for what it is, and let's focus on those tier 2 teams and getting them more competitive games, get more of their players training time with them, spending less times at clubs, less club games, more time with their international sides so that they can improve themselves. I know Argentina they have had a poor tournament, but we have seen the benefits, I think, in the Rugby Championships of them playing in the Rugby Championship on a yearly basis and improving. Obviously, the counter argument to that is that we have seen Italy potentially not go to that next level, but also you have to look at the opposition that Italy are playing, because all the other nations seem to be improving as well. So I think, it's been a great tournament so far. It's been brilliant, but it does raise those same questions that have been raised previously. Has there been an improvement in tier 2 sides? I don't think so. As Jade said, it would be great to see an upset, like to see Portugal do a job, and Australia would be just brilliant for the game, but it'd be very bad very detrimental, I think, to the game in Australia. But I really want to focus on the positives. It's been a great tournament, so there's some fantastic games. And roll on this evening, but like, I know you guys will be glued to it. South Africa v Tonga. I think it's at 8:00 Irish time. I think I'll be barely watching that game. I'll be watching it, but I won't be as glued in, and I hate to say that, but it's because it's not going to be competitive.
Jade?
Yeah, like in the hand scoop, I have this question, right? Fiji needs a point against Tonga to beat Portugal. What does Eddie Jones do next week? After they play Portugal, they got to bye next week, right? So they're basically waiting for the Fiji result before they go out of the tournament. I mean, if Portugal does win Fiji, they through. Does he have a training session? What does he do? Do Australia train, or do they just sit a whole week on holiday in France? Because it's actually pointless for them to sit there. Fiji just need a point against Portugal to go through. What do they do?
Man, at the end of the day, you're still there to do a job. You're still representing your country. The contract does say you have to be coaching throughout until, obviously, you are on holiday. I'm assuming then if you're on holiday, you're on holiday. But yeah, it's a tricky one for Eddie Jones currently. It's probably a tough place to be in, where he also has to kind of reflect on himself personally first, and before he can reflect on what is happening within Rugby Australia. It's a very tough position. I'm sure the players are gutted currently, but you don't want to be in this position in any sport, in any tournament that you play, that you participate in, where you kind of have to get out a calculator to see if Fiji lose by X number of points, or etc., all these other elements. I mean, it's not Bafana here. So yeah, for me personally, I think, he has obviously he will be coaching, but it's a very, very difficult position. I actually kind of feel sorry for them to some degree, because when Dave Rennie was there, I thought he was trying to put some foundation in place, to put some structures in place to grow the group of players that he was obviously giving test caps to. But then all of that to be stripped away and taken away in a blink of an eye, to be honest. Because, I mean, how many injuries does Australia have last year under Dave Rennie? There must have been over 20 injuries to his star quality players. And all of those players were back this season. But, I mean, we didn't see any improvement when Eddie Jones took over. He actually did not choose any experienced players to take to this World Cup. Took 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, and he wanted to bamboozle and surprise everyone. But obviously, it was all like wool all on our eyes, basically. But he's in a difficult position. He has to coach, unfortunately. And basically, I mean, some people are saying this is what he deserves for creating such a media circus pre-World Cup. So, he has to coach. I feel sorry for the players, not really much for Eddie Jones, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there, Scoop. Like, for me, Eddie Jones isn't like he's notorious for overtraining players to an extent and really pushing them in training. So I think there'll absolutely be training sessions that I wouldn't be surprised to be pushing them even further. I totally echo what you said, Scoop. Like, you'd have sympathy now for those Australian players, and you can see how much it means to them. Like, seeing those tears after that game, like, it was it's heartbreaking for them, but like, we all know it's Rugby Australia's fault. It's for appointing Eddie. Like, again, I mentioned this previously, but like, Australia almost won the Rugby Championship last year. Like, like they should have potentially. Like, that's how far they've come. Like, or far they've fallen off the cliff. Like, it's just But it's all of Eddie Jones' making and of Rugby Australia. We know who's to blame here. But yeah, they'll have to get on. It'll be bloody tough for them. Imagine the mood in that camp now. Even if they put in a decent performance now against Portugal, like they're still, like when there have been calls, when about the rumors circulating about Eddie, about Japanese rugby, everything going on about Rugby Australia, when we should be talking about them and how they'll get on for the rest of the tournament. But an interesting question, Jade.
100%. Later on tonight, guys, we've got Tonga versus South Africa. Before we touch on that game, there's obviously the big news about Pollard playing in his first World Cup game. I think we've been anticipating this, I think, from when we even started this podcast. Now it's eventually come to life. He is playing today. What are you guys' thoughts with regards to Pollard being the savior of Springbok rugby currently? Obviously, they have been having kicking issues, goal kicking issues rather. Jade, what are your thoughts with this narrative of Pollard being the savior of Springbok rugby going into this Tonga game, and obviously, hopefully, the Springboks make it through to playoff rugby in this World Cup?
I think if it was a game Pollard really wouldn't want to come back from injury, it wouldn't be the Tonga game. I think, it's really going to be a physical game for him, and no holds bar from a Tonga perspective. Just the style of rugby they play, Tonga can also make the game very, disrupt the game for them, and there couldn't be any structure, so it's very difficult to play against an island team and to stick to a structure. I think the island teams in Argentina are the two other teams basically you really battle to stay to a structure against. But I'm pretty much sure that they chose, Sia and Eben and Dwayne experience it just to keep the boys, just to stick to their game plan, stick to their structure, and to ease Pollard in. It is what it is. I mean, we had a lot of comments from regarding Manie Lebok and his goal kicking. Unfortunately, you have to make those kicks, but also just a note that the Boks do not have a kicking coach in their coaching setup, so maybe that's another issue. There's a few people that came out on social media saying that Manie Lebok's been kicking with the wrong T. That's why he's not striking it correctly, X, Y, and Z. I've even sort of been an advocate by saying, yeah, Pollard's a good goal kicker, but he's not a peak or prime Lee or Penny or, a Johnny Wilkinson, somebody like that. So it's interesting. But yeah, Pollard gets a run today. Let's see. It's his first game in 19. How long's out? 4 or 5 months or so. But it's its first game back. It's going to be difficult against Tonga to really get into the groove of it. We just need to expect for him to be a little bit rusty and, not to again say, yeah, but Lebok would have scored there or Lebok would have passed or have the direct comparison between the two. You got to just understand that Pollard came back now only. So, yeah. It's going to be difficult for Pollard today, but I think he's experienced enough to know what it takes and know what performance to put on. So let's see what he does tonight.
And your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a risk, isn't it? He's played, I think, 40 minutes of rugby in the last, 4 to 6 months. He played for Leicester Tigers a couple of weeks ago. So it is a risk, but I think it's a risk worth taking. Unfortunately, for Lebok, he just wasn't up to the standard against Ireland. So the management, I think, needed to make a call here. I would echo what Jade said in terms of especially being a risk with a game against a physical Tonga side. But we know he's a good player. Does he have enough? I think if it was, I know I always go back to Sexton, and he's that bit older and more experienced. But Sexton arguably doesn't need that kind of game time. You can just throw him into a big game, and he'll put in a performance. It'll be interesting to see now how if Pollard can do the same. But they need him, so let's see how he goes. Hopefully he goes well, especially from a kicking perspective. He is a good kicker, but as Jade said, I don't think he's up to maybe a Wilkinson standard or a Halfpenny standard. So let's watch this. Let's see how he does. I think, again, going back to the Irish game, it's definitely one of the takeaways from that game for me. The 7-1 split was, I know I didn't get a chance to get on last week, but that 7-1 split was a mistake. And not having a 90% plus goal kicker, either on the team or on the bench, was a poor decision, and it's come back to bite them, and that's why they've been forced into starting Pollard against a physical Tonga side. Which let's see how he goes.
No, fair enough. Sticking with you, and being obviously Irish, and obviously on the other Irish end in the UK region. I mean, what's the mood like in Ireland now? Very confident going into the playoffs?
Quietly confident. Ireland as a nation, we much prefer the underdog status. We're not used to being favourites. We're not used to having a really good international side. So it's quietly confident, I would say, is how we are. I think everyone recognises how well we're doing and how we're building nicely. One thing that has to be called out, and it's been discussed a lot, is the lack of injuries. I also just read before we jumped on that Cian Healy is now on standby, and that's brilliant. Like, he only got injured a couple of weeks ago. The fact that he's back and ready to rock is amazing from his perspective, and from Ireland's perspective. Then that's key for me, especially if there's an injury to Porter, because we all saw, especially against South Africa, how important it was. I think he put in over 70 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think quietly confident. And yeah, I like a lot of people a lot of non-Irish, a lot of non-rugby fans in Ireland, they're quite negative about Irish rugby because it is. It's a discussion for another day, but it is quite an elitist. It's referred to as an elitist sport in Ireland. It's not the truth, but it is mainly like a lot of alleged Spurs did go to private schools. We'll talk about it again, but there's that kind of perception of rugby in Ireland, that it's an elitist sport. So there are people in Ireland who do enjoy Ireland getting kicked out at the quarterfinal stage, or Ireland not doing well, and that's the truth. Now they're a minority, but they exist. So there's always that narrative in the background, and you hear it these days as well, even though Ireland are doing well.
Yeah.
But hopefully it will let the rugby do the talking. And like, I think Andy Farrell has just done such a superb job with this team. And the best, I think, what epitomized his preparation, how good he is for Irish rugby, was the reaction to the 7-1 split that I just mentioned. Yeah. What did he do? He went out and he picked a 5-3 split on Ireland's bench. He wasn't worried about what the Boks were in. He wanted to concentrate in Ireland. He wanted to play our game, and that's what won. Like that. That's what I love, and I think that's what, like, I think Ireland now, and there would be a quiet consensus amongst rugby fans that we can definitely do it and potentially should do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, quietly confident, I think. But yeah, Ireland as a country, we're not overly, we prefer the underdog status. But I think in rugby circles, people know we can do it now, especially after that performance against the Boks.
100%. Jade, the mood in New Zealand while sitting in South Africa in the warm sun of Bloemfontein. I mean, the All Blacks now after the big 90-pointer against Italy. Your mood personally, and then what do you think? Obviously, there are people that you socialize and interact with that are based in New Zealand as it is. I mean, is there also is there now a bit of confidence going into the last game of the group and the playoffs, and possibly against Ireland, actually?
There is, I know from what I'm reading online and a lot of, chats with a few guys in New Zealand, there is this payback that, New Zealand were hurt last year when Ireland beat them in that series in New Zealand. The way, Ireland celebrated afterwards, the videos of Peter O'Malley, and Pandi Aki sweeping the streets, afterwards, those images play, go, and it still hurts New Zealand. So I think this is seen to them as a grudge match. I think New Zealand are wary of Ireland because Ireland's beaten them 3 times in the last 5 outings or 4 outings, something like that. But they have beaten them a few times, so they do know that Ireland's had their number a few times, even more than the Springboks recently, and they play the Springboks every year. So it's one of those games where as from New Zealand perspective, you're not sure what can you expect from the All Blacks on that day. I mean, obviously, and they would agree after seeing the game against Italy on Friday. Obviously, they did turn their head and say, wow, if the All Blacks do this against us, we will get hurt. But they won't do it against Ireland because Ireland's a much more prepared team. Ireland tackles, Ireland will not fold, their scrum will not fold so easily, their line-out will not fold so easily, So that's the difference between the two. It's going to be a cracking quarterfinal. I can't call it. My heart says New Zealand, my head says, well, those guys just walloped us last year. They gave us a hiding in New Zealand. And let's be honest, if it wasn't for that 20-minute freak spell in that first test, Ireland might have won 3-0, So they were much, much better than us last year. So there is that fear factor of Ireland, but I think New Zealand's confident. What I like about this All Black team this time around, they've been really under the radar. You don't know what's happening. You don't know what's going on. I mean, Sam Cane is back from injury. He didn't play against Italy. We thought he would play. You're not sure now, is he really going to come from the bench? Or, will Dalton start at 7? Can you drop Dalton Papali'i now at 7 because he's putting in good performances? Shannon Prinziala's back, something they did not have against Ireland last year. A real physical number 6. Running hard. They didn't have that. They didn't have a settled center combination. They look more settled now. So that's a difference. And I think against Ireland last year, you didn't have Richie Mwanga really at 10. You had Bowden Barrett at 10 last year. So, there's all of those aspects. You're looking at, you say, okay, New Zealand are settling well. They're going under the radar. But there is also that, you can get an absolute horrid performance from them. And as much as they have payback from Ireland, Ireland also has that Japan 2019 quarterfinal nightmare that they also want to put at the back of their mind. So I really think, whoever wins that quarterfinal would go a long, long way to win this tournament. But yeah, it's from a New Zealand perspective, I think they're confident, but they're also wary.
Fair enough. They're wary. So your call for tonight, Tonga versus Springboks? Prediction?
Box by 40 or 50. Could be 50. It could be a blowout. I think Tonga's tired. I don't think a Tongan pack. I don't know how many more minutes does Benta Mafuna have in him. I don't know. I think box by 40, 50. It could be a big score tonight. And the Boks also know that they need to get a big score on tonight because to avoid that whole mathematics calculator, it's happening on next week, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Enda, your prediction for Tonga Springboks?
I said Ireland would beat Tonga by roughly 40 points, and I wasn't far off. And I remember Hugh was quite surprised when I said that to him, but I think there was reason for it, and I think it's going to be the same with the Boks. Unfortunately, from a spectacle point of view and from a neutral's perspective, as Jade said, they are tiring, and the Boks are going to be fired up. They always are fired up, but after that loss as well, they want to put that behind you, don't they? And players are pushing for a starting place. So yeah, but Boks by 40 for me.
100%. Gentlemen, we've come to our end of our installment for the Rugby Scoop. Thank you very much, Enda. Thank you very much, Jade. It's been a wonderful conversation to be with you guys. And let's look forward to tonight's game and enjoy some rugby during the week and some banter. Keep sharing those Pirates podcast links on the timeline. And let's keep our conversation going. See you guys next week. And thank you guys for listening in. And see you guys next week. And let's have a great week ahead.
Thanks, gents. Enjoy the game tonight.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.